We're going to be talking about a potential Lamar Jackson trade to the Minnesota Vikings on today's edition of Vikings Now by Chat Sports. My name is Patrick Seatman, and welcome in. So, could the Vikings trade for Lamar Jackson after a bombshell report coming out of Baltimore where Mike Preston of the Baltimore Sun, he's been with the Baltimore Sun since 1983, he dropped an article highlighting the Ravens' issues with Lamar Jackson and hinted that he may actually want out of Baltimore. I think this is one of the most crazy stories of the NFL season, so we'll dive into the entire article. But first, some thoughts. If Lamar Jackson is on the table, I think the Vikings will obviously have to do the due diligence and having a long meeting, a long conversation with the brass and Kevin O'Connell if it would make some sense for the Vikings to trade for the two-time MVP. However, Lamar Jackson, on paper, is not the ideal quarterback you want in a Kevin O'Connell offense. Even though Kevin O'Connell has adjusted a little bit more over this past four-game winning streak where he has leaned more into the run game, he has changed some of his offensive philosophies, but still on paper, KOC, he wants to be a drop-back passing offense, and Lamar Jackson doesn't necessarily fit that bill. But here was the first quote from Mike Preston in this article saying the Ravens should look at possible trades which could net them 2 or 3 first-round picks. Jackson would love to play in Miami, where Tua Tagovailoa is no longer the starter or possible or no longer the star or possible Las Vegas, where Brady, a partial owner of the Raiders, has shown a fondness for him. Baltimore should also draft a young quarterback in the early rounds. So, obviously, if these Lamar Jackson trade rumors, these could just be rumors at a point, but if the trade rumors are true, the Vikings will eventually be linked to him. Like, if this goes out throughout the whole offseason process, we're obviously the Dolphins and Raiders. They're the first two teams connected, but then there'll be a next batch of teams, like maybe the Cardinals. But eventually the Vikings will be thrown into these conversations, so it makes it an interesting conversation for Vikings fans. But quickly, I want to get your guys' thoughts here. What say you on this one? Would you trade for Lamar Action Jackson? Give me a Y for yes or give me an N for no. You guys let me know your thoughts down below in the comments section. Tricky conversation. You guys let me know your thoughts down below. So, obviously, it would be tricky for the Vikings financially. We'll talk about the cap hit situation on the second half of today's show, but they should consider it 110%. And, after the Vikings game yesterday day against the Lions, you can pretty much chalk up the Vikings have a top 5 defense in the National Football League. They've been playing great football over the last couple of months. And if you could roll in the next season with Jefferson, Lamar, Kevin O'Connell, Brian Flores manning that unit defensively, you should be a Super Bowl favorite in the NFC. But you may be saying, well, Patrick, just because that one report came out there and that one quote from the article suggesting that Lamar may want out, there's got to be more to it, and there is a whole lot more. This was coming in from Mike Preston, saying once the Ravens become critical of Jackson, he becomes more withdrawn. It's a shame because Jackson isn't a mean-spirited person. He's just an overgrown kid in an adult's body. It's clear that Coach Jim Harbaugh has become tired of Jackson, even though he builds him up after every game. And the whole John Harbaugh, Lamar Jackson debate from a Baltimore Ravens perspective, if they did have to choose between either the head coach or the quarterback, you would have to assume that the Ravens would be like, hey, John Harbaugh, thank you for all your time. Thank you for everything you've done here. But we're going to try to go get a new head coach that can kind of rein Lamar Jackson in and maybe make him a more mature person and player. So even with this article, I would still think the Ravens would choose Lamar over Harbaugh, but there are some other concerning notes in this article. There was a line saying that Lamar Jackson plays video games late at night. Apparently, Harbaugh had to change morning practices to afternoon because of Lamar. Apparently, Lamar Jackson doesn't lift weights enough, and there was a report out there that said Lamar would fall asleep during team meetings. Now, I think the top line you see here, Lamar Jackson playing video games late at night, I think that's just kind of a low blow because what if it was Lamar Jackson stays up reading books at night? What if he's staying up reading the Bible at night? Would that still be included? I mean, would you rather have your star quarterback out of the club late at night? I'm cool with him playing video games. Now, I think the concerning part here is Harbaugh changing his practice routine from the afternoon to, or from the morning to the afternoon because of Lamar, which honestly I don't think that's too good of a look for Harbaugh regardless. But also the lifting weights part, a little concerning there considering the injury history that Lamar has. I mean, he'll get banged up with just a little injury, and then he'll be out for a couple of weeks, which may go back to him not being in the most gifted physical shape. But also, I think like reports like this and articles like this don't get released for no reason. Like somebody out there wanted this, out there. And whether that's Lamar's camp, which I doubt it, is that Harbaugh's camp, I kind of doubt this. Maybe this is coming from the Ravens brass. Maybe it's them prepping Ravens fans for a potential Lamar Jackson trade. Because if they would just trade Lamar Jackson out of the blue, everybody would be saying, well, why the hell did you do it? But now they have some ground to go off of. Now, obviously, Harbaugh was asked about this article because it is, creating waves here in Baltimore. But he said this. So I don't know where that's coming from. I've never seen that ever. That's not something that I've ever witnessed, and I'm in every meeting, referring to him falling asleep. Our relationship is A+, so I love him. Always have, always will. And I know he's fighting like crazy to get back. So with this article, who knows what to believe? We're already starting to get to that off-season time in the NFL calendar where there's reports, there's rumors flying all over the place. It's just crazy times here in the NFL where you think a guy like Lamar Jackson will be with the team forever, but then it just takes one article to rub him the wrong way to maybe where he could potentially want out. So we'll dive into this more here in just a second. But I do want to quickly here say thank you guys for all the support that we have had on this channel all season long. The people who watch every show, who are commenting, whether you guys disagree with my takes or even if you guys get upset with some of the clickbait headlines, I understand it, but I do appreciate everybody who takes time out of their day, watches these videos. I love what I do, and interacting with you guys in the comment section really make it all worth it. So shout out to all the real ones. Shout out to Skull Nation for supporting the show all season long. Now, we'll talk about this more in depth here in a second, but today's show is brought to you guys by Prize Picks. It is a holiday season and the best time of year for sports. You got bowl games, basketball and football matchups, playoff pushes. It is all happening at once. And when you and I are out here making decisions every day, what gifts to buy, what to eat, which game to watch, there's one place where it feels good to be right, and that is Prize Picks. So download the Prize Picks app today. Plug in promo code CLNS, get hooked up with $50 in lineups after you put your first $5 lineup. And Prize Picks is super simple to play. All you got to do is pick more or less on at least 2 player stats. And if you get your picks right, you could cash in. So get in on the action. Prize Picks is now available in 45 states, including California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. So download the Prize Picks app today and use promo code CLNS to get hooked up with $50 in lineups after you put your first $5 lineup. That's promo code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you put your first $5 lineup. Shout out to Prize Picks for sponsoring today's show. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Now, where does this Lamar Jackson trade with the Vikings get a little tricky here? Is his cap hits. Now, the Ravens backloaded his contract extension where he is pretty much guaranteed $150 million over the next 2 seasons. Or not guaranteed, but these are his cap hits if he would remain on the Ravens roster, which the Ravens here got issues on the offensive line. They're losing a bunch of guys defensively. I'm sure they're going to go to Lamar and be like, hey, man, if you want better protection up front, maybe you get extended, maybe take a little bit of a discount for we can protect you, but almost $75 million each of the next 2 seasons, it's a doozy. And the only way the Vikings would have a chance to land Lamar Jackson, or the only chance Lamar Jackson is traded, is I truly believe is if he demands a trade. I still don't think the Ravens front office and that brass would just willingly trade Lamar Jackson. And even if he is, demanding a trade and he is traded, I still think the Vikings are an unlikely choice here. I guess it makes sense on paper. All right, the Vikings got a really good team. We have seen this team be super successful. We have seen Kevin O'Connell be super successful when he's got a superstar quarterback, and there's no doubt in my mind that the Vikings wouldn't be very successful with Lamar Jackson at the helm. But the question becomes, can you afford him? Does he have some long-term issues? Do you love all the notes that are coming out of this article in terms of Lamar, who he is as a leader and who he is as a quarterback? I always remember this quote from Jimmy Garoppolo. He was talking about playing quarterback and what he learned from Tom Brady. And he always says being quarterback is not just like a day job. It's a lifestyle where it's like you got to be the first guy in, the last guy to leave. You got to handle yourself with the utmost class no matter what you're doing on or off the football field. And it seems like Lamar Jackson has some immaturity issues, but when he's out there on the field, this guy's unbelievable. I mean, the past 4 seasons for Lamar, he's been one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Obviously, 2-time MVP. He's one of the greatest, showmen we have seen on the NFL turf. Obviously, this past season hasn't been as successful, only playing in 12 games. And even when he's been playing, he hasn't been as impactful. Now, I do think he's playing through some injuries, which is why he hasn't been able to take off and run as much. But also, that issue of Lamar, in terms of just being a pure pocket passer, could he regress with age? I think that's a huge question mark. Like, if Lamar Jackson, if he's losing a step or two in terms of his natural athletic ability, can he just be a pure sit-back pocket passer? Now, we have also seen Lamar be a very good passer in certain spots, but also I think that's because of how much pressure he puts on the defenses with his legs. But if they're not respecting his legs as much, and you just ask Lamar to sit back there and pass, I don't know if he'll age as well as compared to a guy like Joe Burrow, where I think Joe Burrow, he would age very nicely. Where at the Vikings, yes, Burrow's got an injury history just like Lamar, but I think Joe Burrow's game can translate more into his later years. Like Joe Burrow's 29 years old. He says he wants to play till he's 40. I think if Burrow, if he stays healthy, like the next 7 years, you're probably getting elite quarterback play. Like elite quarterback play. So I would be all in on a guy like Joe Burrow because I could see Burrow being a guy like Aaron Rodgers. Where even with Rodgers, who's 42 years old right now, I could see Burrow potentially, what Rodgers is doing this year, just being a game manager. Now, quick thought here on Rodgers. Shout out to Phil Mackey for bringing this up. I was listening to the podcast, and I thought he made a good point. Would the Vikings be a Super Bowl contender if they would have signed Rodgers? I'll just ask you guys that. I think they would have been. Mackey was making a good argument. Like, when you have a top 5 defense, he was kind of comparing them to the 2015 Denver Broncos. You got this elite defense, and you got a game-managing quarterback. Where Rodgers is also way better than Peyton Manning was back in 2015. But I think that's the one move I wish the Vikings would have considered a little more. And, maybe Diana Rossini was right all along. The Vikings were considering it. But I just think if they had Aaron Rodgers, they would have been a lot more successful this season. But I think JJ will be back as a starter next season. I do think the Vikings could go big game hunting here at the quarterback position. But I think JJ heading into next training camp, maybe it will be a competition, but he will be the undisputed starter. Because if you bring in a Marcus Mariota or Kirk Cousins, is it really going to be a competition? I don't necessarily think so. So I think this offseason, it's going to be crazy. Who knows who's going to be QB1 next season? Will it be JJ, Kirk, Burrow, Lamar, Baker Mayfield, Matthew Stafford? There's a ton of guys out there. We'll wait and see what happens. But you guys make the call for me. Who will be QB1 for the Vikings next season? Drop the name down below, and we'll get on out of here. As always, let's go Vikes.